after this info session, I hope that you have gained some insight of how you can set up the reference code and the purchase codes, and adding them to your workflows, because there are so many ways that you can use these. So we will start with an introduction of the functions, and then we will do a walkthrough in Business Central. First, we will cover the reference codes, then the purchase codes, and then I will show an example how it can look like in the import journal. And then I have 2 more settings that are of interest connected to these, and then we will go through the questions and answers, the Q&A. So first, an introduction. Let's start with the ExFlow reference codes. You use ExFlow reference codes to apply logic to invoices or documents that you import. So for example, you have ExFlow data capture, ScanCloud, or Finvoice, or somewhere where you import your documents. So that in those programs, you can like use a reference, and when you import it with a reference, you can, with the reference, trigger like approvers, suppliers, dimensions, accounts, and so on. And a reference can be someone's name, it can be a phone number, it can be variations of spelling. So let's say that you have a vendor that has not written a name in the correct way, then it can be a variation of that, or actually anything else that you interpret when you import a document. So there's reference codes, and then we have ExFlow purchase codes. And with ExFlow purchase codes, you can add coding on your lines. You can add it automatically from the vendor card, from a reference, from ExFlow contracts. You can add it in ExFlow setup, and you can use ExFlow purchase codes to split on several dimensions, for example. And with this, you automate your work. For example, maybe you have a vendor that you over and over again add the same lines, same accounts. With the purchase code, you can save that and then use the code instead. So it frees up your time a little bit more. And a purchase code can be linked to a supplier or vendor. It can be linked to a reference, to ExFlow contracts, or an ExFlow setup. And when you import an invoice, you can trigger this code as well. So that way you get fixed accounts for entire lines, for example. And with the codes, you can also split lines, and you can allocate them per percentages, amounts. You can add dimensions, and much more. And also you can quickly create a purchase code directly in import journal. So let's have a look at this in Business Central. Okay, so let's start with the reference codes. I have added as bookmarks up here. Let's see. There we go. So I have added bookmarks up here, reference codes and purchase codes. You can do that, or you can do a search for it. And you don't have to write the full name. You can do shortage of it. So let's go to ExFlow reference codes. And I'm thinking, let's just start from the top and then work our way through the page. So we click on new. This is how it looks like when you're gonna create a new reference code. So up here, it says reference code. Here, this is the value that you are using, such as like a name or phone number. And then down here, you can have related reference values. For example, as I mentioned, if someone is like misspelling the name, you can add like phone numbers, different variations of spelling, and so on. So this is like the reference code name, really. And then description. It's basically you write here so that you know describe what kind of code it is. And then you have vendor number. And if you select a vendor here and you receive a document from that vendor with this reference code, then this reference will be chosen. For example, if you receive an invoice from a different vendor with the same reference code, then it will not be chosen or selected. So if you add a vendor here, then this code will only be used if in a if you also have this vendor. And then you have contract number. So if you have connected this reference to a contract, like an ExFlow contract, then you can see the number here, and you can click here and you go directly to the contract. Up here, you have contract inactivated. So let's say that you have connected it to ExFlow contract and that contract has expired or it's inactivated for some reason. Then you will see here if it's inactivated or not. And then you have first approver. So if you choose an approver here, then this will be the first person in the approval flow. But you have to activate a setting in ExFlow setup to use this also. You can also use this to find an approval rule with this person as a first approver. And then here you have ExFlow purchase code. So you can specify here whether a purchase code should be linked with this reference or not. And then you have purchaser code. If you want to connect that, you also have approval rule. So instead of setting the first approver, you can choose this setting if you know which approval rule should be linked to this reference. And if you set an approval rule here on this reference, it becomes a fixed workflow. So if you're working with a dynamic flow, then you lose the flexibility if you add the approval rule here. However, this can also be an advantage if you want to bypass the dynamic flow for some reason. So if you have it here, then you always have the same approvers. So it can be good, and depending on what you want to achieve, you can keep that in mind. Also here you have blocked. So if you want to block this reference, you click on this button, then you block the whole reference. Then here you also have blocked. So if you have reference values here on the lines, you can block some of them, or if you want to block the whole code, you block it up here. Yeah, and then the related reference values, those you enter if you have any values that should be linked to this reference. For example, then, as I mentioned, another spelling, another phone number, or anything that you want to connect to this reference code, for example. Let's go back here. You have ExFlow related reference values here. So if you click here and then edit lines, you can directly on the line you're on add another or block reference values as well. You can click on edit list, and then you can change settings directly here. You don't have to enter the code. And then you click it again, it becomes like that. If there is a code that is connected to ExFlow contract, you can click here on open ExFlow contract to open it in a new window. You can also reassign to another reference code. So let's say that you're on this line and you want to move all the related reference on that code to another one down here. Then you stand on this line, you click on this one, you choose which one you want to move it to, and then the original one, the original line will become blocked. So you move all the reference values to that one. And if you want to see your blocked ones, you push here, show hide blocked references. And then again, if you push it again, you hide them. You can also create reference directly if you're in the import journal. And also, if you're creating a new user, you can have a setting that makes, like if you create a user, you automatically create a reference code connected to that user. And I will show you that setting later in the PowerPoint. But let's go to the import journal. So I have my columns for reference code here. If you click on these three dots, you go directly to the reference codes and you can add new or you can edit the ones that you have. So those are the things or basics connected to reference code. So let's see, or let's move on to purchase codes. So you can search for it or you can add it as a bookmark as I have done here. So these are my purchase codes. And you can create codes directly in the import journal. It's called Save Coding to Vendor. And you can assign that purchase code to, or you can assign a purchase code, any purchase code to a supplier or vendor. You can add it to a reference. You can add it to ExFlow contracts. You can add it as a setting in ExFlow setup. And you can also then create it as I showed you with the reference now in the import journal. You can create it directly there or use the Save Coding to Vendor. And if you would create a new code, you click on New, and it will look like this. So then you would have to add a code name and write a description. You can work with text lines here. You can have a amount check as well. But then here you can create your code lines. So you can add an account, and then you can choose tax weight, for example, depending on what you have added up here. But then you can also work with like deferral codes. You can use your dimensions. You can add that if you would have an invoice, for example, you can add that 50% should go to one account and 50% to another. You can add a fixed amount, meaning that let's say that you know that you will have a fixed amount of 100 Swedish krona on an invoice for this code every month, for example, then you can add that here as well. So let's go back and look at a code. So here we have the code name is telefon, so very Swedish, telephone, and it is for Eric. And down here you can see that I have 3 accounts, 3 lines. I have added that I want 50% to go to this account, and I have added a dimension, like a department code here, 50% to this one, to production, but then also a fixed amount. So 100 should go to this one to sales, but then the others should split the amount of the invoice like this. There's also a column here called approval. If this is checked, the row or the line will be sent out for approval. If it's not checked, then this line will not be visible to your users on the web, and therefore they cannot approve it. Let's see. Yeah, so let's have a look how it looks like in the import journal. So here I have an invoice, and I imported the invoice with this reference code. Remember Eric, and on Eric, the reference code, I have actually added the purchase code telephone. And remember, I chose that one should have 50% and 50%, and then a fixed amount of 100. So we have actually split it into 3 lines already. We have the dimensions here, and the logic in the system have then added also 3 approval rules. Yeah, so that's how it looks like. We have some more information in our online manual. A question that pops up from time to time is how should we add the purchase code if we have leasing cars, for example? And we have an example on that on the documentation platform. So let's go back to the PowerPoint. Okay, so we have two other settings connected to this. One that I mentioned is that you can automatically create ExFlow reference codes. So if you activate this setting, then every time when you create a new user, it also generates a reference from that username. And that user also becomes the first approver on that reference. When you activate it, you go to ExFlow Setup, you click on Users, and then automatically create ExFlow reference. And also ensure that the company you're working in is included in the ExFlow permissions on the user card of the user if you want this to work as well. And then we have create reference codes for existing users. So you probably have a lot of users right now or a few users. So you can either batch create reference codes or you can create per line. So if you're on ExFlow users and go to actions, you have batch create ExFlow reference to create reference code for all of your users. And it's the same logic as in the previous slide that it becomes the first approver and so on. And then if you just have a few, let's say you have 4 out of 20 users that you want to create a code for, then you can choose only those and create ExFlow reference code.